You stopped telling people how lonely you really feel, because every time you tried, they answered with words that never touched the place where the pain actually lived. They told you to go out more, to meet new people, to stay busy, to think positively, to pray harder, to stop overthinking. But none of those answers explained why you could spend an entire day surrounded by people and still return home with the unbearable feeling that nobody had truly seen you. There are nights when the silence inside your room feels louder than the noise of the entire world. You scroll through conversations that have slowly disappeared. You wonder why the people who once promised they would always be there have become strangers. You replay old memories, asking yourself what changed, what you did wrong, why everyone seems capable of finding connection while you remain standing outside looking in. Sometimes you even question whether something inside you is broken. You smile in public because you no longer have the energy to explain what is happening inside. You answer that you are fine because it is easier than watching someone misunderstand you again. Then, when no one is watching, you whisper another prayer that sounds almost identical to the one you prayed yesterday. God, where are you? Why does it feel like you are so close in my heart, yet everything around me feels so empty? Why does this loneliness refuse to leave? You have asked these questions more times than you can count, and perhaps the hardest part is not even the loneliness itself. It is the fear that maybe it means God has forgotten you. Maybe everyone else was chosen for purpose while you were left behind. Maybe this season has no meaning at all. But what if the loneliness you have been fighting against is not the evidence of God's absence? What if it has quietly become the place where He is doing His deepest work, even though you cannot yet recognize it? Do not rush past that thought, because the answer is probably not what you expect. There is something hidden beneath the surface of this season that most people never discover because they leave before they allow God to finish what He started. They spend their entire lives trying to escape the very place where their character was supposed to be formed. You may feel abandoned, but feelings are not always faithful interpreters of reality. Some of God's greatest works begin in places that look like loss before they ever resemble blessing. Think about how often your life has changed without anyone noticing. Think about how many battles you have fought that no one ever applauded, the tears you wiped away before walking into work, the worship songs you listened to while wondering whether heaven was listening back, the moments when you sat inside your car for a few extra minutes because you did not feel ready to walk into another empty house. Those moments felt invisible. They felt forgotten. Yet they may have been some of the most sacred moments of your journey. There is a strange kind of loneliness that comes when you begin wanting things that the world cannot satisfy anymore. You notice conversations becoming shallow. Places that once entertained you now leave you restless. Relationships built only on convenience begin to fade. You try to reconnect, but something inside you no longer fits where it once belonged. At first, you blame yourself. You wonder if you have become too difficult, too emotional, too different. But perhaps what has actually happened is that your heart has begun changing faster than your surroundings. Growth often feels like isolation before it feels like transformation. A seed buried beneath the soil does not know that sunlight is waiting above. All it experiences is darkness, pressure, and silence. Yet everything necessary for life is happening in that hidden place. Perhaps your soul has entered a season much like that. Perhaps God is growing roots before anyone sees fruit. If these words somehow describe the season you are living through, let me know in the comments by writing "I understand." Sometimes simply knowing another person has walked this road reminds us that we are not as alone as we thought. One of the quietest lies loneliness whispers is that your story is unique in the worst possible way. It tells you nobody has ever carried this weight. Nobody has ever prayed these prayers. Nobody could possibly understand what happens inside your mind after everyone goes home. But that is exactly how isolation grows stronger. It convinces you that your pain is evidence that you have been excluded rather than invited into a deeper process. Throughout Scripture, some of the people God used most powerfully spent long seasons separated from the crowds. Those seasons were rarely comfortable. They were filled with waiting, uncertainty, and questions that seemed to echo into silence. Yet those hidden years shaped qualities that public success never could have produced. Patience cannot be manufactured in comfort. Dependence on God rarely grows while everything is going exactly as planned. Compassion for hurting people is usually born from wounds that have healed slowly rather than instantly. The parts of your character that will one day encourage someone else are often built inside the very seasons you wish had never happened, but while you are living through them, none of that feels obvious. Instead, each morning begins with another quiet disappointment, another unanswered message, another invitation that never arrives, another reminder that everyone else seems busy building lives while yours feels suspended in place. You begin measuring yourself against people who appear surrounded by friendships, relationships, celebrations, and constant activity. Comparison quietly convinces you that everyone else has received something God withheld from you. Yet comparison only shows edited moments. It rarely reveals hidden grief. More importantly, it distracts you from asking the question that matters most. Not why someone else's journey looks different, but what God might be developing inside yours. There is an uncomfortable truth many people resist. Loneliness exposes what constant companionship can hide. When every distraction disappears, the deepest questions finally surface. What do I actually believe about God when no one else is encouraging me? Who am I when applause disappears? Is my identity built upon acceptance from people or acceptance from the one who created me? Those questions are painful because they strip away illusions. Yet they are also the beginning of genuine spiritual maturity. You may have noticed that your prayers have changed during this season. They are less polished now, less impressive, more honest. You no longer pray as someone trying to sound spiritual. You pray as someone desperate for God Himself. There is a beautiful difference between wanting blessings and wanting the presence of God. Loneliness often teaches that difference in ways nothing else can. At first you ask God to remove the season, then eventually you begin asking Him not to waste it. That subtle change reveals something profound happening inside your heart. You may not even realize how much you have grown because growth usually feels ordinary while it is happening. Day after day you keep choosing faith despite limited evidence. You keep praying despite delayed answers. You keep trusting despite unanswered questions. Those quiet decisions rarely make headlines, yet heaven sees every one of them. Faith is not measured only in dramatic moments. Sometimes faith looks like getting out of bed after another difficult night and whispering, "Lord, I still believe you are with me, even though I cannot feel it today." Sometimes courage is not standing before crowds. Sometimes courage is surviving another lonely evening without allowing bitterness to become the language of your soul. Bitterness always promises protection, but eventually builds prisons. God desires something far greater than survival. He desires transformation. He is not simply trying to make you stronger. He is shaping you into someone capable of carrying hope into places where broken hearts are waiting. That process cannot always happen in comfortable environments, because comfort rarely forces us to depend completely upon Him. Think about the moments you have felt closest to God. Were they always during life's easiest chapters? Or were many of them born from seasons when every earthly support seemed to disappear? There is something about desperation that strips away distractions. It leaves only you and God. Those encounters often become the foundation for everything that follows. You may look back years from now and realize that the very season you begged God to end became the season that introduced you to Him in a way success never could. That realization does not erase the pain. It simply gives the pain meaning. Meaning changes how suffering is carried. A burden without purpose eventually crushes the heart. A burden connected to hope becomes bearable because it reminds us the story is still unfolding. Right now it may seem as though nothing is changing. Yet rivers shape stone, not through one dramatic moment, but through constant, faithful persistence. God often works with that same quiet consistency. Every prayer, every tear, every act of obedience, every decision to trust Him one more day becomes part of a transformation too gradual for human eyes to measure. The loneliness you experience today may not be the final chapter. It may simply be the place where the deepest foundations are being laid before the visible parts of your calling ever appear. That is difficult to believe while the silence continues, and perhaps there are still questions inside your heart that have not been answered. Hold on to them for now. Because there is another layer to this journey that many people overlook entirely. Sometimes the greatest battle is not the loneliness itself, but what loneliness is trying to convince you about your identity. Before that truth becomes clear, you must first understand why this season has felt so personal, so relentless, and so unlike anything you ever expected. And when you begin to see that, you may discover that the silence you feared was actually preparing you to hear God's voice more clearly than ever before. Before we continue, if this message is helping you see your own story differently, share your experience in the comments. Someone reading your words may realize they are not walking through this season alone, and sometimes God uses an honest testimony to become the encouragement another weary heart has been praying to find. There comes a point in prolonged loneliness when the pain changes shape. At first it hurts because people are absent. Later, it hurts because you begin wondering whether their absence says something about you. That is where the deepest battle begins. It is no longer simply the silence of your phone, the empty seat beside you, or another weekend that passes without anyone asking how you are doing. The battle quietly moves into your identity. You begin interpreting every disappointment as evidence. Every goodbye becomes another piece of proof that you are somehow less lovable, less valuable, less worthy of being known. You replay conversations from years ago, searching for the sentence that ruined everything. You examine your personality, your appearance, your decisions, your faith. You convince yourself that if you could just find the flaw, perhaps you could finally earn the closeness you long for. Without realizing it, you slowly stop asking God what He is doing and begin asking what is wrong with you. That question has stolen peace from countless hearts. It sounds humble, but it often grows from fear instead of truth. The enemy of your soul does not always attack through dramatic temptation. Sometimes he simply whispers a false interpretation of your circumstances. He allows loneliness to speak louder than Scripture. He encourages you to measure your worth by the number of people who stay rather than by the God who has never abandoned you. Little by little, your confidence begins shrinking. You hesitate before reaching out because rejection feels inevitable. You stop sharing your dreams because they sound foolish in your own ears. You pray with less expectation because disappointment has become familiar. The tragedy is not only that you feel alone. The tragedy is that loneliness begins convincing you that you deserve to be. But God has never defined you by the number of people who understand you. Throughout history, many of His servants walked roads that few people could comprehend. Their isolation did not diminish their calling. In many cases, it clarified it. Consider how often God accomplishes His greatest work away from crowds, mountains, deserts, prisons, caves, wilderness places, lonely roads. Again and again, the places that seemed empty became the settings for profound transformation. Not because God delights in isolation, but because isolation often removes competing voices until His voice becomes unmistakable. Imagine trying to hear a whisper in the middle of a stadium. It would be nearly impossible. Yet in a quiet room, the gentlest voice becomes clear. Sometimes your life has become quieter, not because God has left, but because He is inviting you to hear what constant noise prevented you from hearing before. This does not mean every lonely season is directly planned in every detail, nor does it mean pain itself is good. Loneliness can come through broken relationships, unexpected losses, misunderstandings, or circumstances no one would choose. The Bible never asks us to pretend suffering is pleasant. Even faithful people cried, questioned, grieved, and waited. The difference is that they gradually discovered God was present within their suffering, not only after it ended. Perhaps that is the invitation before you now. Instead of asking only when this season will finish, ask how God might be meeting you inside it. There is a quiet transformation that happens when you stop treating loneliness only as an enemy and begin allowing it to become a classroom. You start noticing things you once overlooked. You become more sensitive to the pain hidden behind other people's smiles. You recognize the exhaustion in someone's eyes because you have seen it in your own reflection. Compassion deepens, patience expands, pride softens. Your dependence on God becomes less theoretical and more personal. These are not changes that happen overnight. They are formed through ordinary days that feel almost invisible. It is tempting to dismiss those days because nothing dramatic seems to happen. Yet most of life is built there. Think about a sculptor shaping stone. One strike of the chisel appears insignificant. Hundreds of careful strikes eventually reveal beauty that was hidden all along. Your spiritual life often grows the same way. Each lonely evening that you choose trust over despair, each morning that you choose gratitude over resentment, each prayer whispered despite unanswered questions, becomes another quiet shaping of your soul. One day you may look back and realize you became someone entirely different without noticing the exact moment it happened. That realization can also change how you see the people who walked away. For a long time, you may have believed every departure was a verdict on your value. But perhaps some relationships ended because they belonged to a previous season rather than your future one. Growth sometimes creates distance that neither person intended. Not every goodbye is punishment. Not every closed door is rejection. Sometimes God allows certain connections to fade because clinging to them would keep you from becoming the person He is forming. That does not remove the grief. Grief deserves honesty. Jesus Himself wept. Faith does not require pretending that loss does not hurt. It simply refuses to believe that loss has the final word. There is freedom in allowing yourself to mourn, without allowing mourning to define your identity. Perhaps someone watching this has been carrying a heartbreak they never truly processed. You kept moving because life demanded it. You stayed strong because others depended on you. You smiled because it seemed easier than explaining the ache inside. But hidden grief rarely disappears simply because it is ignored. It often disguises itself as numbness, discouragement, or isolation. God is not intimidated by that hidden pain. He is not asking you to impress Him with perfect faith. He welcomes honest hearts. Some of the most beautiful prayers are not eloquent at all. They are simply truthful. Lord, I do not understand. Lord, I feel forgotten. Lord, I need you today because I cannot carry this by myself. Those prayers may seem small, but they are often the beginning of deeper intimacy with Him. There is another surprising lesson loneliness teaches. It reveals the difference between being known and merely being surrounded. Many people spend their lives in crowded rooms while secretly feeling unseen. They collect acquaintances, yet hunger for genuine connection. Your longing for something deeper is not evidence that you are asking for too much. It reflects the way God created the human heart. We were made for authentic relationship, both with Him and with others. Yet authentic relationships require authenticity, and authenticity becomes possible only after masks begin falling away. Loneliness has a way of exposing the masks we did not realize we were wearing. The mask that says everything is fine. The mask that seeks approval at any cost. The mask that fears disappointing everyone. Slowly, painfully, God invites you to live without them. That process feels vulnerable because it is. But vulnerability also creates space for healing that pretending never could. If this part of the message reflects your journey, write "Still Trusting" in the comments. Your words may encourage someone who has been wondering whether anyone else understands this hidden battle. There is something powerful about discovering that faith is not the absence of struggle. Faith is choosing to keep walking while struggle continues. Perhaps that is what God has been nurturing inside you all along. Not a faith that depends upon perfect circumstances, but one that remains rooted even when emotions rise and fall like waves. Such faith is rarely built in seasons where everything comes easily. It grows when you keep returning to God, despite the silence, despite the waiting, despite the uncertainty. Every return strengthens trust. Every surrender loosens fear. Every act of quiet obedience plants another seed whose harvest may not appear until much later. Do not underestimate those unseen seeds. Heaven does not measure your life by visible success alone. It sees faithfulness that no one applauds. It sees the nights you chose prayer instead of giving up. It sees the mornings you worshipped with a heavy heart. It sees every moment you resisted becoming cynical, even though disappointment invited you to. Those moments matter more than you know. They are shaping a heart capable of carrying hope without being controlled by circumstances. And as this journey continues, another remarkable truth begins to emerge. The loneliness that once felt like an empty room slowly becomes a place where God teaches you that His presence is not limited by the absence of people. That lesson does not remove your desire for healthy relationships. It simply places your deepest security somewhere they cannot take away. When that foundation is established, relationships become gifts rather than the source of your identity. You begin loving people without demanding that they complete what only God can fulfill. That freedom changes everything, and it prepares you for what comes next, because the story is not ending in isolation. There is still another part of this journey waiting to be understood, one that reveals how God often uses these hidden seasons to prepare hearts for purposes they could not have carried before they were transformed. There is a moment that arrives quietly, so quietly that you may not even recognize it while it is happening. Nothing dramatic changes overnight. The circumstances around you may look almost identical. The same house, the same routine, the same unanswered questions, the same memories that occasionally return without invitation. Yet something inside has begun shifting. The loneliness that once felt like an endless punishment slowly loses its power to define you. You still desire companionship. You still hope for meaningful relationships. You still experience difficult days. But you are no longer measuring God's faithfulness by the number of people standing beside you. You are beginning to discover something far deeper. You are discovering that the God who never promised a life without lonely seasons has consistently promised His presence within them. Looking back, you realize there were countless moments when you believed nothing was happening. Yet those were the very moments that changed you most. The prayers you thought disappeared into silence were slowly reshaping your heart. The waiting you believed was empty was teaching perseverance that could never have been learned through comfort alone. The disappointments that once seemed meaningless were quietly breaking your dependence on things too fragile to carry the weight of your identity. If every door had opened exactly when you wanted, perhaps you would never have learned to trust God's timing. If every relationship had lasted forever, perhaps you would never have discovered that your deepest security could not rest in human approval. If every dream had unfolded according to your own plans, perhaps you would never have seen how limited your vision truly was compared to God's eternal perspective. This does not mean every painful event happened because God desired your suffering. The brokenness of this world is real. People make choices that wound others. Circumstances unfold that no one would willingly choose. Hearts are broken, friendships end, families struggle, loss leaves scars. The Christian hope is not that pain itself is good. It is that God is able to bring redemption even from what was never meant to destroy you. That is why your story does not have to be defined by the chapter you are living today. Redemption has always been one of God's greatest signatures. He specializes in restoring purpose, where people only see endings. Think about the person you were before this lonely season began. Perhaps you were constantly seeking validation. Perhaps you feared disappointing everyone. Perhaps you said yes when your heart needed to say no. Perhaps you believed your worth depended upon being needed, admired, or included. Then life became quieter. At first, that quietness felt unbearable. It exposed fears you had hidden beneath constant activity. It revealed wounds you had ignored for years. It forced you to confront questions that busyness had successfully distracted you from. Yet now, even if the process is incomplete, you can see small signs of growth. You notice that you recover from disappointment more quickly than before. You pray with greater honesty. You listen more carefully. You recognize that your value does not disappear simply because someone failed to recognize it. These changes may seem ordinary, but they are profound. They are evidence that God has been working in places invisible to everyone except Him. The remarkable thing about spiritual growth is that it often becomes visible only after enough time has passed to look back. While you are living through it, it simply feels like another ordinary day, another prayer, another act of faith, another choice to forgive instead of becoming bitter, another decision to trust when certainty remains out of reach. Yet over months and years, those ordinary decisions become an extraordinary testimony. One day someone will sit across from you carrying the same loneliness you once carried. They will tell you they feel forgotten, invisible, exhausted, and misunderstood. They will expect advice, but what they will receive is something even more valuable. They will encounter someone who understands, because they have walked that road themselves. Your compassion will not come from theory. It will come from experience, redeemed by God's grace. You will know when to remain silent, because you remember how exhausting empty advice once felt. You will know when to offer hope, because you remember the day someone reminded you that your story was not over. You will know how to point people toward God's faithfulness, because you have witnessed it in your own life, not through spectacular moments alone, but through quiet faithfulness repeated day after day. Perhaps this is one reason God sometimes allows seasons that feel hidden. Public influence without private formation can become dangerous. Character developed in secret often protects what success alone cannot. Humility, patience, gentleness, endurance, wisdom, compassion, these qualities rarely appear instantly. They are cultivated through repeated opportunities to trust God when no one is watching. It is easy to believe that only visible accomplishments matter, yet heaven often celebrates victories the world never notices. The decision not to give up after another disappointing day, the choice to forgive someone who never apologized, the courage to pray again after feeling discouraged, the willingness to worship even while waiting. These moments may never receive applause from people, but they are precious in God's sight because they reveal a heart being transformed. There may still be days when loneliness returns with unexpected strength. Healing is rarely a perfectly straight path. Some mornings you will wake up full of peace. Other days, an old memory, an empty chair, or a forgotten anniversary may stir familiar emotions. Do not mistake those moments for failure. Growth does not erase your humanity. It teaches you where to carry it. Instead of carrying your burdens alone, you learn to bring them honestly before God. Instead of believing every emotion as though it were absolute truth, you learn to anchor yourself in His enduring character. Feelings change. God's faithfulness does not. Circumstances shift. His love remains constant. Human understanding rises and falls. His presence continues, even when it cannot be immediately felt. There is tremendous freedom in no longer demanding that every question receive an immediate answer. Some answers come only through time. Others may remain mysteries this side of eternity. Faith does not require complete understanding before taking the next step. It simply trusts that the one leading the journey sees what those walking the path cannot yet see. Imagine climbing a mountain covered by thick fog. From your position, visibility extends only a few steps ahead. You cannot see the summit. You cannot see every turn. Yet the path still exists, even when hidden from view. Much of the Christian life resembles that climb. God often provides enough light for the next faithful step, rather than revealing the entire journey at once. That can feel frustrating to hearts that long for certainty. Yet it also invites continual dependence upon Him, rather than upon our own limited understanding. If this message has reminded you that God has remained faithful even through difficult seasons, share your testimony in the comments. Someone who feels completely alone today may discover hope simply by reading how God has sustained another person through their own wilderness. Never underestimate the quiet influence of an honest story. Sometimes a few sincere words become the answer to someone else's desperate prayer. As you leave this message, do not leave believing that loneliness automatically proves you are chosen, nor that every difficult season carries the same meaning for every person. Rather, leave remembering a timeless biblical truth. God is able to meet His children in seasons of loneliness with grace, wisdom, comfort, and transformation. Your present circumstances do not have the authority to declare that you have been abandoned. The cross already declared how deeply you are loved. The resurrection declared that despair never has the final word. The promises of God remind us that He remains faithful even when life feels uncertain. Your loneliness is real, but it is not the whole story. Your waiting is real, but it is not the final chapter. Your tears are real, and Scripture reminds us that God is near to the brokenhearted. He sees what others overlook. He hears prayers that never become public. He understands burdens that words cannot fully explain. Even now, while you may still wrestle with unanswered questions, you can choose to believe that your life has not slipped beyond His care. There is purpose in continuing to trust Him one more day. There is hope in continuing to seek Him one more morning. There is strength available for the next step. Even if you cannot yet see the destination, One day you may discover that the season you would never have chosen became the season that taught you to know God more deeply, love others more compassionately, and stand more firmly in hope than you ever imagined possible. Until then, keep walking. Keep praying. Keep believing that the God who has carried countless people through wilderness seasons is fully able to sustain you through yours. The loneliness you feel today does not have the final word. God's faithful presence does.